I spoke with an Ethiopian man this morning where I bought my coffee. He said in his country, it's like it's always been. Just one dictator replacing another. But after I paid, he added, at least the killer is gone. Amnesty International says the repression comes from government responses to protests, which are driven by social, economic grievances, the right to health, the right to education, and the right to speak up. Their report highlights government's efforts to silence protests in Kenya, Togo, Guinea, and Ethiopia by using force and arbitrary arrests. In Ethiopia, arbitrary detention continued under the state of emergency declaration lifted last June. Many of the hundreds imprisoned under the Anti-Terrorism Proclamation, ATP, were held in excess of 6 months. And they faced long delays, unfair trials on charges brought under the law, many complaining of torture and other ill treatment while detained. Last week, the government signaled big changes ahead by freeing several prominent critics, opposition leaders, and their supporters. Some 1,500 political prisoners were released last Thursday. The announcement of another state of emergency came one day after Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn resigned as part of a continued effort to kickstart societal reforms. Ethiopia has also been reeling from deadly protests since 2016, especially in the two most populous regional states of Amhara and Oromia, over alleged political and economic marginalization. Tuesday, Ethiopian authorities ordered its security forces to take all the necessary measures to deal with anti-government agents in the rest of Oromia region. Johnny Carson says the country has to hold better elections.
It has to make sure that all of the country's different regions and different ethnic groups feel totally a part of the country's political governance, that they have an opportunity for their voices and their views to be heard in the national arena, that their areas are going to get the same kinds of development support and assistance as other regions, and that their leaders are also going to have an opportunity to hold and occupy senior positions, and that their political parties and others are going to be able to participate actively in the parliament.
U.S. officials in Addis and Washington quickly responded to the newly declared state of emergency with its rights restrictions, saying it is a concern of ours, and the move undermines recent positive steps creating a more inclusive political space in Ethiopia.
The Prime Minister of Ethiopia resigned. It is a sign of democracy, and it is a sign of responsibility. It is a good thing. We don't see it a lot actually in Africa and in Horn of Africa. And when we compare it with the other African countries, you can say Ethiopia, it is more democratic country now than before.
Paul Sisco, VOA News, Washington.